Coming up on today's update, from professional athletes and the fans in the stands to high school players and those on the sidelines, they all have something in common: the need for an emergency action plan designed to save lives. Good morning, I'm Jessica Lovell, and welcome to the Morning Medical Update. It was 6 years ago in May when the unthinkable happened to an Olathe West High School pitcher named Brennan Connell. Alexis Del Cid shares his story.
Just an ordinary high school baseball game on an ordinary Monday afternoon in May. And if you were in the stands watching and turned your eyes away from the boy on the pitcher's mound for just a moment, you would have missed it. This is when Brennan Connell's life nearly ends. It's the only piece of video, and it cuts off right here just before Brennan goes limp, collapsing to the ground. For his mom and dad, seeing it once in person was enough. They never want to see it again.
Really, only 1 in 10 kids who suffer a sudden cardiac arrest survive. And
Brennan Connell is that one, because when he doesn't get up right away and dust himself off, as his teammates drop to their knees and start praying, what many of them don't know is there are people nearby who know exactly what to do with the equipment placed exactly where it needs to be to save his life.
Our panel today knows exactly what to do with an automated external defibrillator, as it's only one part of a bigger back-to-school emergency action plan. In studio with me is Caitlin Truhe, athletic trainer supervisor of the Youth Sports Medicine program at the University of Kansas Health System. Good morning. Great to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
Joining us virtually this morning is medical director of the Youth Sports Medicine program at the health system, Dr. David Smith. He works closely with Brent Unruh, Director of Operations with the Kansas State High School Activities Association, who is also joining us this morning. Thank you all for being here with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
Hey, guys. Well, Dr. Smith, I want to start with you because emergency action planning, we know, is your passion. You have led the charge for training at all high schools and middle schools where we have athletic trainers. You've led drills with the coaches and the trainers at Olathe. But when thinking of Brennan, what difference do you think that training made in helping to save his life?
Yeah, first of all, Jess, I'm going to clarify. The people that lead the charge are our athletic trainers. They're the boots on the ground. I just oversee this. But with that said, that incident with Brennan was quite interesting, and thank goodness we had a practiced emergency action plan. We had the personnel on the field to implement the plan, and fortunately the outcome was very good. Without that emergency action plan and people to implement it, we don't know what would have happened with Brennan, but I can speak today because his life was saved.
Dr. Smith, I've heard you say over and over again that emergency action planning is much more than just knowing how to operate an AED. It's knowing where it is, who's getting it, how to get to it, and of course where it's located at an event. You run every emergency scenario one might imagine at an athletic event or a practice. So why can't schools just use that one same plan everywhere?
That's true. You know, the AED is very important. It'd be like a chain on a bike. The chain's important, but you got to have all the other gears in place, and we have everything in place, so if it's not a cardiac emergency, we're able to handle other emergencies, and we practice it.
Caitlin, you have spent a good part of your career with students at Blue Valley High School. That's where you are currently. You had a student, Thomas Hoskins, who suffered an injury. It actually triggered the emergency action plan.
Yeah.
From this video we're going to take a look at, it looks like Thomas got the wind knocked out of him. And here's what he said after taking that hit.
I knew it wasn't the wind knocked out of me, but I told my coach that so he wouldn't be worried about it. And then Caitlin came over and I was like, it's definitely not the wind knocked out of me. Like, I could feel it was something different.
Yeah, he came straight over to you, which is a good thing. That's
Yes,
a good
it's
very good relationship that you have, though, with those students and those athletes. You knew it was something more, right?
Yeah, so when Thomas fell, I saw him fall into his elbow, and I was like, that didn't look great. Hopefully it's just the wind getting knocked out of him, but maybe not. And so I'm glad that he was as honest with me as he was. We monitored him, and then once he started to kind of de-escalate, then we ended up activating the EMS plan, and our administrators went into action, called 911, and our SRO team helped EMS get to the locker room, actually, where he was at, and it was really the smoothest process that we could have asked for.
Yeah, how did that EAP training kick in? I mean, how do you know? I mean, how does that work? I mean, because we do these trainings throughout the year. We're going to talk more about that. But how did you know to really put that into action? Like, this is what we train for.
Yeah. So really any type of emergency. So his blood pressure was not within normal range. He was obviously looking very pale because he had a spleen injury, and so we activated the EMS by we weren't on the field, so there wasn't a hand signal, but we did utilize the radio system and asked our SRO to call 911. And when that happens, then the administrators say, I'm going to get mom. Another administrator goes and unlocks the gate. The coaches are on the field still playing their game, so we had other administrators coming in to where we were with Thomas in the locker room asking, hey, how can we help you? What do you need? So we were able to get EMS directly to him.
Brent, not every high school or middle school in Kansas has certified athletic trainers, as we know. How does an EAP refresher course help? How does this help in an emergency, especially if you simply just don't have the resources?
Right. Yeah. In a lot of our high schools, you know, the coaches and athletic administrators might be the ones that are responding. There might not be the luxury of having that athletic trainer there. And so these rehearsals are just so key for everyone to understand their role, whether it's, calling 911, retrieving equipment, opening a gate. Everyone just needs to understand exactly what their role is and be comfortable with that. And sometimes even students could be involved in that emergency response. So you just have to use whatever personnel you have access to.
And of course, we're focusing on sports medicine, but in Kansas, what are the guidelines for having emergency action plans for all schools, since students, as we know, can suffer an emergency in marching band or cheerleading as easily as a sporting event?
Right. Our expectation and our message to schools is that there should be an EAP for every activity and every venue where activities take place within your school district. So every EAP is going to be a little unique depending on the setting you're in, with the facility you're in, things like that. We also have a requirement that every coach or sponsor, and it's not just athletic coaches, it is the music teacher, the cheer sponsor, they all have to be certified or trained in CPR and AED as well. So, we understand that it's more than just sports. It encompasses all activities. And, these activities are usually taking place after the school day when, a lot of school personnel are no longer there. So there's definitely a big responsibility on those that are running these activities.
Dr. Smith, I want to talk more about these trainings. You do 3 EAP trainings a year. Tell us about the fall training that you do heading into the school year. What's the goal of each of these trainings, and why are there 3 of them?
Yeah, so the fall one's the biggest one because we're reconvening to get ready for probably the busiest time of our sports season at the youth sports level. And so we focus on cases that would be the most common. Obviously, football's a big sport. We got soccer going, volleyball, etc. So our EAP would focus on head and neck injuries. It would focus, of course, on some of the cardiac emergencies, seizure disorders, anaphylaxis. Then as we get into the winter season, we think about the sports that are participating then. Wrestling becomes a big, both men and women. And so we have to think about the same thing, head and neck injuries. Also, we have dislocations, a little more common sometimes in wrestling. And so we think more sports specific for the season. And then the spring rolls around and it's outdoor sports again, soccer, softball, baseball. You know, balls strike faces, unfortunately, so we have to think about facial injuries, dental injuries, eye injuries. And so each season brings in a new set of potential problems, and by doing this 3 times a year, it's just a way that we get back together and think through what potentially we might see. These practice essentials are extremely important.
Dr. Brian Beaver is one of our emergency medicine physicians, and he is also the medical director for the Johnson County EMS system. Here's what he says about participating in the training and the benefits to the EMS services.
One of the exciting things I get to do as EMS physician advisor with the University of Kansas Health System is work with people like Dr. Smith with the youth sports program, get to come work with these great folks and provide some of that perspective and insight from the EMS side on how we can best interface. We're very passionate about making sure that that handoff from the athletic trainer to our firefighter paramedics and our paramedics on the ambulance is as smooth and as clean as possible. So it's a really great opportunity for me and for what I get to do with the University of Kansas Health System.
Well, we love hearing your comments and your questions. You can use the chat or the thread on YouTube or Facebook. You can email those questions or comments to the Medical News Network. That information is there on your screen. Professional sporting events, of course, are not immune to emergencies and the need for EAPs. Among one of the higher profile ones was the one that played out on national TV when Damar Hamlin suffered cardiac arrest during a Buffalo Bills game against the Bengals. We all remember holding our breath, watching as emergency responders and athletic trainers worked together to save Hamlin. The cardiac events can happen to spectators too. Recently, Royals fans collapsed outside Kauffman Stadium. As the official healthcare provider for the Royals and the fans, members of our medical team put their EAP to work.
We heard a call saying that there was a seizure in the parking lot, and then next thing you know, we heard that they were doing chest compressions.
There was somebody performing CPR already, but I could tell that he was tired. We learn about that in our ACLS protocols and doing RQI through the hospital, so I could tell that he needed a break, and I said, hey, I'm popping in next cycle, let me get in and start doing CPR.
I went ahead and grabbed the AED, put it on her, and then the AED basically suggested to shock her.
They went to a hospital to find out that, hey, the patient survived and the patient's doing really well. It was an awesome feeling, and we were really happy for her.
If I was a fan here, knowing that University of Kansas Health System is out here providing care, I would feel very safe knowing that they've got my back. If anything were to happen, I can rely and count on the team out here.
Medical staff were honored at last Wednesday night's game against the Angels. Staff were thrilled to be invited onto the field to throw out the first pitch. Dr. Smith, you work side by side with the medical teams that provide health care to our professional teams and the fans. How does the emergency action plan differ from the plans used for high schools and middle schools?
You know what, Jess, it's actually almost identical. In fact, I am one of the team docs for the Royals, and we review this in the spring before the season starts. And when I look at what we do, the practice session with the Royals, it's really the same as what we do with our youth sports medicine program and our high school and middle school athletic trainers. Likewise with the Chiefs, we have obviously the docs with the Chiefs are KU physicians, and they do the same thing. Actually, at the professional level, it is mandated by NFL, MLB, and the National Women's Soccer League. So Dr. Lisa Vopat and her team practice it before the current season. So when I look at them, I'm actually very proud of what we do with the youth sports medicine program, because we are at the same level as the pros, and that's the way we should be, and we can keep raising the bar each year, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that's a big peace of mind, I'm sure, for parents of those sports kids. Brent, what emergency action plans are encouraged for Kansas schools, and then which ones are required by state law?
Yeah, well, recently the state of Kansas adopted some legislation that requires a cardiac emergency response plan in every school in Kansas, and that's grades K through 12, not just high school. And so that's something that's relatively new, and schools are required to submit those plans through the KDHE, which is great. I mean, that's a great standard for our schools. Our expectation, as an activities association, is that we know the cardiac emergency response is extremely important, but there's so many other emergency situations that can take place through activities as well that Caitlin and Dr. Smith have already talked about. So, we just expect those EAPs to be all encompassing and cover all those different, potential injuries like the head, neck, the environmental risks and emergencies and those kinds of things.
Dr. Smith, there's a lot of effort around emergency action plans for cardiac events at schools, but what other medical emergencies are out there that really might pose a threat to athletes?
Yes, I touched on them earlier. If you think about that, the cardiac emergency is extremely rare. However, it can happen. You got to be ready for that. But head and neck injuries are probably the highest catastrophic, potentially problematic injury. So we're available to obviously take care of someone on the field if they have a head and neck injury. Other things that can happen can be sudden things, anaphylaxis. We may have someone that unfortunately has an allergy to peanuts and they forget the granola bar they just chomped on the sideline caused a problem. So we need to be ready for that. Diabetes, we do have diabetic athletes that are insulin controlled and they can have trouble with low or high sugar. We need to be prepared for that. Seizure disorder is another one. So we have to really think outside the box, and when I stand on the side, I really do think about anything that could potentially happen, including what might happen with a ref running up and down the field or the court. In fact, I go introduce myself to the referees just to say, hey, we're here for you too, which they usually appreciate. So it's being prepared. Caitlin touched on the abdominal injuries, splenic ruptures, liver lacerations, big time bleeds. Typically that doesn't happen, although in track and field, we had a javelin get pretty close to someone and went through his thigh. He had to be ready for a thigh bleed. Dislocations are not catastrophic, but those are things that can happen. And major fractures, obviously, open fractures can be something that we need to be prepared for. It's the whole gamut. We really need to be ready.
Yeah, I would say so. All right, Dr. Smith, my daughter started cheerleading this year, and so when you start talking about head and neck injuries, I talk about keep me up at night. She said, Mom, I stunted today, and I'm like, what? So you guys have your eye on the cheerleaders too, right?
You know what? Cheerleaders have the highest per participation rate head and neck injury. There's not as many cheerleaders as football. Football always gets kind of the, oh, wow, watch out for football. I watch out for cheerleaders because per participation rate, their head and neck injuries are pretty high. So they need to be extremely cautious in their training and competition, that they have spotters that know what they're doing.
All right, so not the news I wanted to hear from you on this Monday morning, but I thank you because that'll keep me hyper vigilant. All right. That's a concern. I mean, it's parents watching their kids at every activity. Caitlin, the heat, humidity this summer has been pretty intense. And that was for summer practices leading into, thank goodness it's kind of cooled down a little bit. But what emergency action plans, what do those look like for athletes that might be overheated?
Yeah, well, we hope that our coaches are looking ahead at the weather and maybe having morning practices instead of afternoon practices. But if they do go in the afternoon, there are guidelines as far as what is safest for them to practice in as far as equipment goes. And then if there were to be an emergency, I've worked with my coaches and staff on how do we get the kid from the field to the cold tub that is filled for them? How do we get them into it? And so we have tools to help carry them and cart them to those places. And then basically we call EMS, right, as part of that. And we help to cool their body temperature down in the cold water immersion. And we have different roles for different coaches. I have one coach to help hold the athlete up in the water, right, because most of the time they may not be able to hold themselves up. We have someone monitoring water temperature, making sure that there's a constant rotation of water. And then we're also monitoring their core body temperature up until EMS gets there. And all of our protocols across the board are to cool first and transport second.
Well, let's get to some questions from our community this morning. Brent, I want to ask you this question from Angie. She wants to know, where can I find an action plan online, especially where it might not be required at a school?
Right. We have a template available on our website, kshsaa.org. We have a health and safety page there, and we have a template that anyone can download to kind of get started in building a plan. So John, there are a lot of. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
there's a lot of other resources too. NATA.org, the National Athletic Trainers Association, has a lot of good resources in building emergency action plans as well.
So on that note, John wants to know then, do little leagues need to be thinking about these emergency action plans? Should they be putting something like that in place? I mean, are they really for everyone?
Absolutely, yeah. Every level of sports and activities needs to have this in place. I've had 3 kids that have gone through youth sports, and you show up at the ball diamond and you hope there's an AED there. You look for where the AED's at and those kinds of things, and you have that expectation that there is a plan in place there should something happen.
Kristen wants to know, Dr. Smith, what should coaches keep in their cars as part of an emergency kit? Again, if there's not a requirement, but they just want to be extra safe and keep their kids safe.
That's kind of a tricky question, but a very good one, because like I say, if you have a toolbox, you want to know what's in the toolbox and how to use every tool in the toolbox. So it may be dependent upon the coach's experience, their training, their interest. There's plenty of training courses out there that they can get trained. I know I help coach my kids' youth sports, and I'm trained in this area, but the coaches were very interested in what they might need. It's not just, oh, they sprained an ankle, maybe you tape it up. So I would be cautious recommending things to coaches, what to put in a kit, but if they put it in the kit, be prepared to use it. I think the biggest thing is have an emergency action plan and be prepared. You may be the only one out there as a coach. You may have a parent come out of the stands that says, hey, I'm a medical person to help. That's great. But even just getting the basic CPR course, that's required in the state of Kansas for coaches. But for Little League and club sports, I don't know what they require. I think it's dependent upon the organization. Very good question, though.
Barsha wants to know, and I'll ask this to you, Caitlin, and we touched on it a little bit, but why can't you use the same emergency plan for every school? Or what's an example of how it might need to be customized to a specific school?
Well, even just with Blue Valley High is going under construction this year, so our plan had to change, right? So every door and entrance and access point to that facility is going to be different. You may have an area where all of your fans are coming in right through a ticket gate, and that's not the best, probably easiest area to clear out if EMS is coming. So really you want to make sure that each building, you know exactly where the AEDs are located, what door EMS is going to come through, to make it the fastest access to that patient.
Joellen wants to know, what might a spectator at any event reasonably expect from school or public events, and what could be our questions to officials? Who wants to grab that one?
Brent, you want to take that one?
Repeat that one more time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure, no problem. What might a spectator at any event reasonably expect from school or public events? And what could be our questions to officials?
Well, I think for a spectator should expect that event and that venue has an emergency action plan in place. They should expect that the appropriate medical equipment is there should something happen, such as an AED. And that there are people there trained to respond. I think that's a basic expectation that should be met. In terms of questions for officials, if we're talking about sports officials like referees, is that what we're talking about?
I'm not quite sure, but answer that the best you can. Just maybe how do we question these, what's expected out at these events?
Yeah, in terms of sports officials, I think Dr. Smith already alluded to it. They're somebody they're at risk as well at these events, and so they're exerting a lot of energy, and we don't necessarily have a great health history on some of these officials, so that is a little bit of a concern. But we do expect our schools to be ready to provide services to them as well should something happen.
A question
and I'll
from
dovetail in on that,
yeah,
Jess.
please.
Jess, let me dovetail in on that, because I think this is very important to know, and Brent knows this. Caitlin now sits on the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee for KSHA, and I used to sit on it. So we look across the state. what does the community have, the resources, the personnel? You know, there's small towns that don't have what we have over in the big city here. So I think it behooves everybody to know, what do you have available? We're partnered very well, as you heard Dr. Brian Beaver, with Johnson County EMS. But if I'm on the Missouri side covering, I want to know what KCMO EMS, what their protocols are. If you're out in western Kansas, what does your community have? So that is an extremely important thing, and that's what KSHA, Kansas State High School Athletic Association, does extremely well. They look very closely across the state of Kansas to try to up the bar for everybody. So back to the question, where do you live? What's your club sport? Who's on the field? It's good to ask questions. It never hurts to ask.
That's what I was going to say. If you're a coach, a parent, a school official, ask questions. That's the way to go. Last question is from Stuart asking, why is it just sports that talk about these emergency action plans? What other venues might benefit from having something like this? Brent?
I'll take that one because I work out in the health club. I won't tell you which health club, but I had someone pass out in the locker room when I was working out or finished my workout. And fortunately, we attended to this gentleman. He was heat overloaded, older, but everything was taken care of. And afterwards, I went up to the health club, the manager that was there, and say, what is your plan? I know you have an EAP, but what do you do? He says, we call EMS, and we're ready, and all of our staff are certified. So that's important to know, the health club. I've been down at the Kaufman Center for Performing Arts, which is a wonderful place, and there's a lot of older folks that enjoy going there, and they have a plan. I've seen the emergency people, that's first aid folks, but they're available to help. So it is important. It's not just sports. The problem is it's focused on sports because it's high visibility, and I think probably the majority of the injuries would happen in sports. But you saw the example out in the parking lot of the baseball game, and thank goodness we have personnel out there that are trained to help. So everywhere, construction sites, you name it.
Yeah, it can happen anywhere. Brent?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's just kind of the sports have a little higher profile with a lot of this stuff, and it is, for the participants, it's a higher risk activity than some of the other activities. But yeah, any event, any activity taking place, they need to be prepared, because you just never know, and you need to have a plan in place to be prepared to respond.
What to get our takeaways today, Brent? What do you want people to know who are watching and listening?
I think the main thing is just, number one, for schools, just have a plan and practice, rehearse that plan. It doesn't need to start out as a complex plan. If you're just starting out and trying to put something together, keep it basic, keep it simple, and eventually that's going to evolve and grow. But just have a plan and work from there.
Dr. Smith, what's the big takeaway today?
My takeaway is, I say it frequently, the failure to plan is a plan to fail. So if you don't start with at least some kind of plan, like Brent said, then something's going to happen, and you're going to look back and wished you had a plan. So everybody should take away with that message. And the other message I would have is, think about the pro level. We have all the resources, all the staff. I mean, we basically almost have a hospital, it seems like, out on the field to take care of the pros. But here we are at the high school, middle school level, and smaller venues that don't have all that personnel. Thank goodness we have athletic trainers that are well trained, but one of our athletic trainers takes care of a high school, I won't tell you which, and she told me last week they have 825 athletes signed up for sports this fall with an athletic trainer that's responsible. She can't cover every venue. So wow, if you want to plan, have a plan. Otherwise, potentially something catastrophic could happen. That's my take home.
Caitlin, what's the big takeaway today?
Yeah, really, just to speak to Dr. Smith's point of the athletic trainers and the coaches and the staffs at the school, they take the athletes' health as the number one priority. So emergency action plans, everyone sat down, every coach has sat down with me and with our administrators, and we've talked through what we're going to do when someone's present or not, and just where they can access the emergency equipment to help save an athlete's life. So the schools are definitely prepared. to handle really any situation, hopefully, that comes their way or doesn't. That's the goal, right?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for hanging with me this morning here on the desk. Thanks to all of our guests for being with us today and taking care of our local athletes. We really appreciate all of that. And thank you to our guests for being with us. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Alexa, Siri, ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. I'm Alexis Del Cid on the next All Things Brain Health, how using AI can put your child's brain development at risk, what you can do to better protect your kids, and how one teenager is getting it right. Tuesday at 8 a.m.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and open mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.